Welcome, folks, to the penultimate episode of this little mini series, the interval of positive and interval of negative. We've seen these before. The interval of positive is the domain over which the function has a positive output. The interval of negative is the domain over which the function has a negative output. So what that means when I'm looking at this one is, what x values can I plug in to this function and end up with a positive answer, a positive y value? Well, if I look at this graph, that's going to be everything, because we already talked about the fact that the domain of this thing is y is greater than 0, which means it's always going to have a positive output. So I'm going to say the interval of positive is from negative infinity to positive infinity. If this thing is always positive, we've said it before, we'll say it again, if it's always positive, then it's never ever negative. So I'm going to say never. Okay, so there's basically, if you have a function that does not have an x-intercept, then it's going to be all positive or all negative. There's not going to be that flipping happening. And this one does not have an x-intercept. It doesn't ever hit that x-axis. Therefore, it's one or the other. In this case, it's all positive. When I look at this example, I do have a change because I have one section that seems to be above that x-axis. So from here all the way up to infinity, this thing, or as x approaches infinity, this thing is above that x-axis, meaning if I plug in a -1, I'm going to get out a 2. If I plug in a 0, I'm getting out a 3. When I plug in a 1, I get out a 3.5, and so on and so on, and those outputs are always positive. So the way we would write that is we would say that starting when x is -2, so from -2 to positive infinity, this thing has a positive output. Okay? Now, because it's not positive across its whole domain, we do have a negative section. So the negative output is this section from that -2 and down, because it looks like if I plug in a -3, then I'm going to get a negative output. If I plug in a -2.5, I'm going to get a negative output. Anything below that -2 is going to give me a negative output. So I'm going to report that by saying from negative infinity to -2. Okay, so together those make up the entire domain. It starts at negative infinity, it goes to positive infinity. But there is this flipping point right there at that x-intercept that goes from positive to negative. Okay, so this is kind of special to, well, it's not really. With exponential functions, you could end up with it always being positive or always being negative, or you could have some of each. So you just have to look at the graph and determine which it is. Right? And that's it with interval of positive and interval of negative. We've just got one more video left, so let's go ahead and get to it.